Good afternoon. Good afternoon, OIT family. So happy to have you guys out there. Very excited about today. We appreciate everybody that's in the that's already watching live, and I see Keith's already there. Hats off to you, Keith. Thanks for joining. Feels like I never leave you, man. So today we're very excited to have with us Miss Carolyn April of CompTIA. We're going to be talking about trends in managed services. Reading the tea leaves, seeing what's happening. It's very important to have all that information. As we do with all things, let's get the information from an expert. So help me in welcoming Carolyn. Carolyn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. And thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm looking here through your bio, and you have actually a very impressive background here. You did editorial for InfoWorld, worked over at Ziff Davis. I see your title today, Senior Director of Industry Analysis at CompTIA. What is industry analysis?
I could make anything up, couldn't I, given the generic nature of that title. Mainly what I do, I work in the market research team at CompTIA, and there's only a few of us. We do a lot of research for a small group, but my focus, and I've been at CompTIA for almost 11 years now, my focus is mainly on the business side of the tech industry, specifically the channel, and I focus a lot on MSPs, and we're obviously going to talk a lot about managed services today. And that's what I guess industry analysis is all about. So I'm not the technical analyst. We have one of those, my great colleague, Seth Robinson, but I focus more on the business side and the trends that go along with that as it pertains to the channel, MSPs, and to some extent vendors.
I love that. Okay. And you have some information to share with us. You have your presentation we'll put up on the screen in a second. So you want to get that, you want to start presenting that, and we'll bring it up?
Yeah, we can bring it up right now.
Awesome.
All right. Am I in business here?
You're in business. Let's hear what you got. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, I thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the insights and data that we have collected here about managed services. Just a little bit of background on this study. It is one that we do almost every year so that we can have year over year and benchmarking trends to look at and see how the market has changed. So it's important to note that this isn't an inaugural study. It's one that we do quite frequently, and we like to take the pulse of what's going on in managed services. I will also say that the data collected here was done right before the pandemic hit. And so there are lots of little caveats that we need to note in the elephant in the room. But what I've noticed is that despite the year that we've had with 2020 and some of the impacts and upheaval that it's had on businesses, the MSP market has remained relatively strong. And the data that I'll present today remains fairly, I would say almost, exclusively stable. There haven't been a ton of changes in what's gone on. So from there, go ahead.
Despite the surprises, there's enough information that we can make intelligent decisions on how to move forward because we've had enough time to evaluate it at this point, right? It's not...
Oh, yeah, 100%. And like I said, there were a few things I'll talk about. There's been some actual opportunities or silver linings, which I hate to say in a time of a pandemic, but there have been for the MSP market, and we will talk a little bit about that. So, but I just want everyone to know, keep in mind that we understand at CompTIA that we are in the middle of some weird times business-wise, and so for some of you, there may be issues that are not resonating, and for some they may be resonating in a different way, but this is good stuff, and I'm ready to dive in. So I'm going to start with some of the key takeaways that we got from the study, which are always good to sort of kick off before we get into data in more detail. And this is based on a survey that we do of MSPs exclusively. And we have a large sample, and I won't go through all the methodology, but it is a good statistical analysis of what is going on in the market right now. One of the key takeaways is the basics, table stakes types of things that you sell are still the number 1, 2, and 3 or more things that are in an MSP's portfolio today. They still top the list. Everybody is still doing basic infrastructure. And it makes sense because to get into the MSP market, you really need to have the fundamentals. From the fundamentals, you can move up the stack. And we're seeing a ton of that happening, which is very encouraging. But if you are an MSP today and you still feel like your business is steeped in, the help desk or network services or IT support, you are not alone. Not alone at all. And these are things that customers are going to come to you for, and they're going to want those, especially SMB customers. These are the basics that they're looking for. So until you can move up and start going crazy with emerging tech or application services and other types of more sophisticated services, these are still things you're going to have in your portfolio to be appealing to customers. And we're seeing.
Well, I think it's important, right? Because we see, like, in this new norm, we see all this, like, this craziness happen, and people are moving to, working from home and then working back, and, who knows what's going on. It's easy to forget the foundational stuff that made MSPs what they are still holds true. It's still necessary today.
Yep.
So it's great to see that.
Yep. You can't dispense with that unless you're going to be really surgically nichey, in something. But for the most part, you need to be able to provide these things. The other thing that is a must is having cybersecurity skills. So we asked the question of MSPs, looking ahead, what's going to be the number one thing that you think is going to ensure some good market performance over the next 2 years, not just for your company, but for the MSP market in general. And as you can see here, more than half of MSPs said it's all going to be about security. And let's face it, I don't think anybody, not just MSPs, but any solution provider, anyone in the channel who presents to a customer whatever it is that they have in their portfolio and what they're going to sell without some security element or umbrella around that, they're going to lose the deal to another provider who at least does basic level security. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about the trend that we're seeing now about many MSPs completely specializing in security. And then we know them as, managed security services providers, always a tongue twister for me. I'll just say MSSPs. And I think many of you already know what that is out there. And they're devoting their practices to security. And I don't think I'm the first one that needs to tell anybody that security is getting so much more complex. So building skills in that area is going to be imperative moving forward.
Are you seeing a commensurate desire from the client side asking for this too? Like, I totally get why the MSP should be first and foremost in saying it's important to gain these skills, but are the clients demanding it as well?
They absolutely are. And part of that is because there's so much media and news about security issues, data breaches. You see headlines about that all the time. So even, the most lay person who doesn't understand technology in a different industry will read the newspaper, or do people read newspapers? And I used to write for newspapers, and now it's sad, but they'll be reading online or whatever it is, however they get their news. And they're going to know, hey, this is an issue. Or within their own organization, they have some sort of security breach. And so these things do become top of mind, just like some of the emerging tech, which I'll talk about next here, is becoming more top of mind because end customers are starting to see, they're bombarded with information about these new technologies. So they, in turn, start to ask their providers, hey, what's your, acumen around security, and what do you think we need to be doing? And we at CompTIA do a regular annual security study that is, distinct from this one. And what we have found over the years, because it is another one of the annual studies we do, is that customers have gotten a lot more savvy and a lot more demanding about asking questions about how to secure their own networks, how to train their people, which is another big thing, because as many of you know, one of the number one problems around security is human error within an organization. Everybody always thinks it's attacks from the outside, but a lot of the problems that happen with security happen on the inside, and they're innocent in nature, but it just comes from lack of training around people that you have on your staff.
Yeah. Keith brings up, I mean, you just answered this. I haven't asked just before you. But, seeing if it's as important to the clients, and your answer is yes. I like what you're saying. Leverage the exposure the media is giving so the client's already aware, and then you expand on the knowledge and go into it more deeply, and that presents your value, and hopefully you have a plan for how to address it. But I love the way one ties into the other. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you get the general question from the customer, and then you become the educator. And that's your that's your foot in the door, so to speak, for the sale. So it's a nice progression. One of the other key takeaways is the fact that we talk a lot about emerging tech at CompTIA. Internet of Things arguably is one of the, if not the most mature, that still is in this category. And it's beginning to be a big deal for managed services providers. And what we're seeing is there's just a very natural trajectory for channel companies, including MSPs, to get into Internet of Things. Think about, I try to talk about it in 3 ways, and I have more detail on this later in the presentation, but one of the things that we see is if you're just a reseller and you sell hardware, that's step 1 with Internet of Things. You've got sensors and all those little things and gadgets that you place all over industrial sites or agriculture sites and warehouses that use Internet of Things. And you can simply stop there if you want. I mean, and that's what you do. You resell and you deploy. If you're an MSP, you can take it to step 2 and become the provider that manages and monitors all of those hardware pieces.
Are you seeing that a lot? Because IoT has been a buzzword for a couple of years now. But are you seeing MSPs actually taking more control over managing and monitoring those items?
We are seeing that incremental. It's certainly not widespread right now. And this comes, and part of this is more recommendation perhaps than fact, although we're seeing a lot more MSPs see some, and mostly larger ones, because a lot of the Internet of Things deployments happen in industrial large companies as opposed to SMB environments. But it's certainly something that we expect at CompTIA to see more MSPs get into in the future. And then the holy grail, which is something we're not seeing a ton of yet, but I think we're going to get there, is the 3rd step, and that would be MSPs who aren't just doing the basic monitoring, managing, and troubleshooting of these sensors and other type of hardware devices, but doing the data collection, because there's reams of data coming in, and not just collecting the data and handing it over to the customer, but analyzing that data and then being able to provide prescriptive advice about their customer's business based on the data that they're collecting. And that is very lucrative. It's a higher skill level for sure. And it's certainly, like I said, it's sort of the holy grail of, where to try to pursue and get to as an MSP who's going to be in the IoT world.
I know you said it's early days, but are you seeing the more mature MSPs out there, the large MSPs out there, engaging with data analysis and having subject matter experts for that already?
We're seeing a lot more of that, to be perfectly honest. Again, it's still a niche market for a lot. Data analysis, though, as you're going to see in a slide that I'm going to show in just a bit, has climbed up the ranks of the list of things that MSPs are doing right now, whether it's related to IoT or not. Just basic, business data analysis. A lot of channel firms in general are getting into that business and using it as a consulting opportunity. So they're getting away from pure taking title of products and just reselling them, and getting more into presenting themselves as consultants, whether it's technical consultants or more we're seeing business consultants. And part and parcel of that is being able to do data analysis. It takes skills, so that's another big issue in the channel, is finding the right people, and not always easy. There's been a perennial challenge of finding people with the right talent, or being able to retrain or train people in your organization. So that's continuing to be a challenge that we see. Then finally, I'm sorry, did you have another question, Ray?
No, Keith's just making a point. I wanted to bring it up on screen, saying, how can we offer security without being in charge of the IoT? I agree. Own and manage the whole ecosystem, not just pieces of it, and that way you can be accountable for all of it. Not so much a question as just impressing the points you're already saying. Absolutely.
Great. And then the final key point we found is, we asked the question, okay, we've asked you what you need to ensure a positive market for the next couple of years. What do you think could derail the next couple of years for the MSP market? And not surprisingly, and this is actually pretty prescient because these questions were asked before the pandemic happened, but people are worried about general economic conditions, which I found interesting because at the time when we asked this, the pandemic hadn't happened and the economy was doing pretty well. But people always worry about this. It can be, there can be a change that just happens cataclysmically. And so there's concerns about that. And as in tandem with that would be, customer spending being pulled back. So those are two more macroeconomic concerns. And honestly, those are typically lower on our list when we ask this question. Typically, the general concerns about what could affect the market negatively tend to be more wonky and related to technology, like, people having issues with how to shift to the cloud or, just digitalizing their businesses, et cetera. But this year was straight up macroeconomics. So we're going to see how that plays out in 2021.
Should be very interesting.
It should be. So one of the things we always want to know is, I've been in this market. I hate to date myself, but I've been following managed services for a really long time, and I feel like we've been talking about the need for traditional resellers to move to recurring revenue forever and a day. And so we always want to know, if you describe yourself as an MSP, where did you come from? Are you one of those resellers that transitioned, or you're a pure play, or do you do this offhandedly? You do it situationally, which is kind of an odd business model, but indeed it does exist. And what we've found in an encouraging way is that there are a lot more pure play providers, or at least those who describe themselves as pure plays, of managed services today than we've seen in any previous study. And what that tells me is that we might have some new entrants into the marketplace. And there's always been a big concern at CompTIA and elsewhere that the channel is aging, okay? And that we're not seeing the pipeline filled back up with young entrepreneurs who are taking over and running channel businesses. So this, it may be an indicator of good news that we're able to encourage younger technologists to open businesses in this space without having to be one that transitioned from a more traditional type of reseller business. The predominant model, though, is going to remain hybrid. That's what we project. Most companies that started out as traditional solution providers, resellers, who now describe themselves as MSPs, and that may be where they're generating the majority of their revenue, are still going to sell you hardware if a customer asks for it. They're still going to do a project for you if the customer asks for it. And that's because they're not going to leave money on the table. And it seems like a smart way to run your business. So we expect that the kind of the hybrid provider who may hang their shingle out as an MSP is still going to be the predominant business model moving forward.
Compared to and I'm sorry to call you on the spot on this, but
that's okay.
Compared to last year's numbers, were the new entrants into the market, was that a smaller percentage?
Yes. We didn't do the study last year. We took a year off from it, but going back a couple of years, forgive me, I don't have that percentage on the top of my head, but it was definitely lower than this 35% that you're seeing.
And that makes sense. People coming into the market are, especially with all the large communication channels, right? There's more networking groups, more peer groups, more publicly available information than there was 10 years ago. They get to see the disparate models before making the decision of how their business is going to go. And if you're starting from day one, MSP is a no-brainer, right? Purely managed services, purely MRR, that's a no-brainer. Whereas if you've been doing this 25 years, it may be harder to shift that boat.
Oh yeah, it's very hard. That's why it's taken so long for so many companies to do so, because most of the companies in the channel today are SMBs themselves. So they're small companies, and trying to, even though it may look great on paper to move to recurring revenue, trying to change your business model when you are a 10-person shop and you're just trying to make payroll and keep the lights on is not, and you don't have anyone to devote to this, to this grand master plan to change your business model is not an easy thing. I had a dad who ran a small business. I still have the dad. I just don't, he just doesn't run the small business anymore. Right. But, if you had told him at 50, this is the new best way to do things in the sheet metal manufacturing business, because that's what he ran. He would have just said, no, I'm doing okay right now. I'm able to pay my people. My family is set, and I cannot devote the resources to going in this new futuristic way. And I understand that. And so I think that represents some of the channel for the, some of the challenge, I should say, for smaller businesses who are, beat over the head with, you need to move here, you need to move to this, you need to move to that. Well, some of them aren't going to, and that's okay. That's my final say on that one. But so we asked our MSPs to look back on the last 2 years and what they how they assessed overall MSP market performance. So it's not just their company, but what they think of it as of the entire space. And this chart provides an example of some of the segmentation that we do with our data. So we can slice and dice. So I can give you data based on the size of the company that answered, on the vertical that they focus on, et cetera. This happens to be how they describe themselves, whether they were a hybrid or a pure play or the situational provider. And as you can see here, in the last 2 years, people are pretty bullish on how the market performed. And that's not surprising. The economy was doing well. I think a lot of MSPs really flourished in the last couple of years. Not surprisingly, the pure play providers gave the highest marks to how the market performed for them and in general over the last couple of years, because they've doubled down, tripled down on being MSPs only. So that makes perfect sense to me. For anyone out there who likes segmentation, I'm happy to provide, maybe after the fact, if you can get in touch with me any way that you want to sort of slice and dice the data that we have. So it's maybe something that pertains specifically to your business. Happy to do that.
Yeah, it's not surprising that, like you said, the pure play provider is saying it's great. They have the highest profit margins, service-based business, they're going to have the highest margins. The day's always going to be sunny for somebody like that. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yep. Not terribly surprising, but definitely cool. So what's going to make the next 2 years look good for the market? And again, we don't know right now what's going to happen in the next 2 years.
We don't know tomorrow.
So I have to keep putting that little caveat in there, so you don't think that I'm just pie in the sky and I don't realize what's going on. But yeah, we do know. As mentioned earlier, most of the MSPs we talked to said we need to up our game on cybersecurity and get more, sophisticated expertise. I will not go through every one of these, but a couple I like to highlight. One is that customer awareness of managed services has increased. Ever since I began covering managed services, one of my biggest complaints has been the name, the nomenclature. If you are a lay customer out there and you are talking to someone at a cocktail party or whatever, you're networking and they ask you what you do and you're like, I do managed services. What is that, right? It's not something that's intuitive. And we at CompTIA have had a million different meetings with managed services providers, try to come up with a new name, something that is a little more instructive, that tells you what you do. I'm a welder, I'm a teacher.
Right.
I'm a,
it's not ambiguous, right? Absolutely.
And we can't, we failed. We cannot come up with a good name.
Well, no, we added another S. So no, and I get it. And so how do you account for the increased awareness? So is that industry groups like CompTIA, MSPs doing additional awareness campaigns, that kind of thing, or is it just?
Yeah, the latter is mostly what it's all about. Managed services providers have gotten a little more sophisticated about the marketing themselves. marketing has always been, the poor stepchild of most solution providers in general. Obviously they got into technology because that's what they do and they love. Sales comes along with that, but marketing has been an afterthought, if it's even been a thought at all for a lot of these companies. And that what we have seen though, and we ask this question a lot about marketing, is we've seen a renewed commitment or a commitment, initial commitment to doing much better job at branding and marketing. And a lot of that was driven by the cloud, because the cloud has sort of abstracted vendors from the customer relationship. Because it used to be that back in the day, if you were in the channel, you went to market based on which vendor you aligned yourself with. So you would go with business cards that said, they were emblazoned with IBM's, logo on them and Cisco's, and that's how you would present yourself. Well, now that everything's in the cloud, or a lot of things are in the cloud, and we're much less hardware centric, it's really incumbent upon managed services providers to present themselves. So they have to brand. So they've had like a real come to Jesus about having to learn marketing and get good at it. And I think that's what has helped raise awareness among customers.
I think that's one of those silver linings. I'm with you 100%. COVID, horrible. Pandemic, horrible. Job loss is horrible. But not every situation is 100% horrible. You have to have some positive takeaway. Otherwise, you're not moving forward. I think, MSPs, and tell me if I'm wrong, you're the perfect person to tell me if I'm wrong, but I think MSPs have been able to double down during this time and say, reevaluate their marketing efforts, reevaluate their strategies for sales, and kind of fine tune them a bit because they've been forced to. It's not I don't want to say anybody had any free time. Nobody did, but, or at least I didn't get to, but, we did have plenty of time to sit there and have an introspective look of what are we doing? How are we getting clients? I can't go door knock anymore. I can't do, now can we increase our cold call campaigns? Now do we increase our social media awareness? They've had to re-examine those things, I think, and push harder.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have learned to go multi-channel with how they do things, how they reach out to customers. Customers want to be communicated with in myriad ways. Some are very old school. They want that phone call, but we see increasingly in studies we've done, social media obviously is one of the ways they want to be reached out. What they want, customers want companies to use, interactive tools online, and really, I've been very encouraged by the way that MSPs have stepped up and tried. I kind of call it like during this pandemic, it's been a time of introspection, as you said, and reflection, but also a time to be able to be creative and flexible and learn new things. So like you said, few silver linings there for sure. So I'll move forward with the one other thing I wanted to. Again, these slides will be available to anybody who wants them. So if there are things here that I gloss over or don't get to, don't worry. You can find me. But the other one is we're seeing a lot more specialization, especially by vertical. And we recommend that highly. It's a differentiator in the marketplace. So MSPs who can become de facto experts in, you name it, manufacturing. And I don't just mean manufacturing, the big term, but getting even, lower and lower on the, in terms of the type of manufacturing, retail, healthcare, you name it. Those sorts of specialties can really glue yourself to customers and fill your sales pipeline. Because you're the specialist on a particular application that, only beauty salons use. For instance, I use that example a lot. That, there's an MSP, a friend of mine talks about, who works in California and has made an entire MSP business around serving salons. And they know everything about the type of software that those salons need, and they manage it, and it's been a boon for them. So verticalization, specialization is going to be important moving forward. All right, so this is just another segmentation slide. So I won't spend too much time on this because it's based on the same question. It was like, so what are your expectations for performance over the next couple of years here? Again, split out by how they describe themselves, whether they're hybrid, pure play, situational. And as you can see, people are pretty bullish, as I mentioned before, about how they expect performance to be over the next couple of years. Again, COVID, we don't know. But Not surprisingly here, we see a big difference, though, in how the optimism that the pure plays have over where they think things are going to head over the next 2 years. Again, not surprising at all. So one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I get asked about a lot when it comes to the MSPs, is a lot of them have this sort of great unknown about how their business may be performing in all the various functional areas that are out there. They're always asking me things like, where should I be at with profit margin? Where should I be at with, process efficiency? What processes should I have in place, et cetera? And these are all, I think with MSPs, this is even more important because it's such a process-oriented type of business than a typical transactional type of solution provider is just selling, I'm going to sell you this piece of hardware and it costs this amount, and and that's an easier
dichotomy, right? Like we're a business that sells on service, but it requires so much technical acumen that it's, you have to balance the two, right? You have to sell in the relationship, but you still have to have the efficiency, the automation, the operational maturity to be able to have decent margins so you can afford to do the things you need to do.
Yep. And a lot of these smaller MSPs in particular don't know how to measure it. They don't know. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data out there that compares so you can benchmark against your peers.
Right.
And I think when many companies are desperate for that, like they may think they're doing really well, and then they may see same size MSPs, their peers out there who are doing dramatically different percentages in all of these categories. It's sort of always been asked. We don't do it at CompTIA. It's a big undertaking to try to do a peer comparison of the entire marketplace. Not to mention a lot of times people lie. But
oh, yeah. We have the challenge of, like, it goes back to the beginning of what you said. There's no clear-cut definition of what an MSP is. So operational maturity or automation or anything like that, a lot of these metrics are going to be weighed differently if you're a hybrid, or if you're a pure play, or if you came in as a VAR and then you added managed services as a line item. It's hard to lump them in, right?
It is hard, and people want to scorecard themselves against others, but it's not. It's like it's apples to oranges, like you said, in many cases. But we tried here. So we asked for a self-assessment, and I won't highlight everything here, but not surprisingly to me, customer retention rates are considered by many of these respondents to be where they think they're the most mature. I would say that makes sense because in the MSP world, you're signing customers to contracts, and most customers, just human nature, psychology, is you're not going to dump a contract and go try to find a new provider unless the one that you're working with currently really screws up, right?
Right.
Think about it in your own, just your home and life, unless something goes really wrong, it's a pain to switch, figure out how you're going to move your data over, do the research to find a new provider. So you're most likely going to get to renew that customer unless you, like I said, really fall down on them in some way. So that does not surprise me. So I think most MSP customers tend to renew. And so, obviously MSPs then think they're most mature in that area. Down at the very bottom where they find themselves least mature is in maximizing profit margin. And I think this is the voodoo that a lot of them can't figure out. And it's because they can't measure against their peers. They all come from a different place, and whether they're hybrid or pure play, et cetera. And the very unfortunate fact is that many MSPs today are getting commoditized because they will sell on the lowest price to earn the deal. And that has not been a good thing for profit margins at all. Just for basic economics right here. And so we really recommend at CompTIA, sell on value, sell higher priced services, and don't back down. You will lose deals to customers that are purely out there just looking for the bargain or the price. But in the long run, you're talking about profitability. Fewer customers that buy at a higher value are going to make you more money than having a whole corral full of customers that are buying at bargain basement prices.
Absolutely, and that's something, and these are not unique concepts, and I don't mean to minimize what you're presenting at all, but how many industry experts have said the same thing over and over, trying to, we've heard Dipple say this, we've heard Pika say this, McBain has said this, Larry said this, you're saying this, I've said this 1,000 times. Sell at a higher number, make enough margin so you can do the things you need to do. You're going to be more sustainable. You don't have to take every client, take the right clients. That's better for your business in the long term.
Yeah, and be willing to fire clients that you may already have, that you're figuring out are not profitable at all for you.
Those A, B, and C clients, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, and it's funny because, especially we talked about, service-based business that needs technical acumen, in a business that has so many technically proficient operators, right? Most business owners, most MSP business owners are usually technical savvy. They fail to quantify meaningful data. They fail to look and these metrics that you're putting here. I don't know very many that are actually looking year over year and saying, okay, well, let's look at the 2019 numbers. How did we hit these marks? And weigh them against the 2020 numbers or project for 2021. But it's so meaningful to be able to have an actual plan. Those are the ones I would probably guess are not having the which client is best conversation, because they already know what suits them and their business model. But it needs to be done. I mean, to ensure longevity, it's a requirement, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely a lack of both short and long-term planning by a lot of these companies. And again, I'm not faulting many of them, because I go back to the fact that a lot of them are very small companies. And so trying to act as though you're, an enterprise company that, does the 1 quarter plan and the 4-year plan and thinks very strategically can be very difficult for these companies. But to your point, it's important that they try. All right, so let's see. I'm taking a lot of time here, so I want to just move quickly through what we're seeing.
My fault. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're having a nice conversation here. So this is what people are selling over the last 2 years. Again, those table stakes services are always at the top. They're foundational. You can't really go to market without them. But I will point out things that have risen from way down on the list to much higher, and that's the middle of that stack here. And those would be the business services. So things around analytics, which I mentioned before, doing compliance. A lot of this is consulting work. And there's a lot of money to be made there. We just talking about profitability. Anything related to business advice is going to be more of the highly profitable area for companies. So it's encouraging to see MSPs getting into this at much higher levels. Also moving up the stack and doing a lot more with application services. A lot of this is because of the whole SaaS revolution. So a lot of MSPs are selling software as a service application, and they're able to add a ton of those to their portfolio and work with ISVs to do so. So we've seen that rise over the last few years significantly. And then Internet of Things is something that's really climbed. It wasn't even, I don't even think it was on the list the last time we did this. At least it didn't make this top list. So that's certainly an area where MSPs are starting to see some traction.
That's interesting to see it jump up that high up the first time it's on the list. It's impressive. Are you seeing a lot of, you talk about business analysis, business recommend, business, I don't want to call it business coaching. It's not business coaching, but talking about business procedures and operational stuff. Are you seeing more of that today with the mature MSP, where it's not just focusing anymore on what their stack is and what the technology is, but focusing more on, determining which LOB app could be used, or operational processes, and gaining efficiencies, even with workflow within the staff, people stuff. That's not so much technical. Are you seeing MSPs take a more active role in those things?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the smart and savvy ones are definitely doing that. A lot of it has to do with analytics expertise. So, and then sitting down with your customers, doing those QBRs, but not just, this is all the troubleshooting we did for your network this month, and printing out some report, but going to the customer and saying, we can see and project out like a year from now, you're going to need more of this or X of this, or being able to help them fill in, an answer for what their pain points might be, or working with them, a customer, on their goals and objectives for the coming year, which may have nothing to do with technology, but being able to have sort of that view of how to use technology to be able to help them achieve those goals, but then also be able to convey that message in a business type of conversation or vernacular versus having this is the widget that we need to use to do this. And this has especially been sped up by the fact that we're seeing so many line of business people in the end customer community having tech budget now, and they're the ones that are doing the buying, and they don't want to sit down and talk to anybody about techie anything. They just want you to look like we're trying to cut costs in this area from our department, or we want to speed something up revenue wise in this area of our department. And being able to be an MSP who can talk about that, and then on the back end you provide the applicable technology, is what will glue you even more strongly to those customers.
Yeah, I agree. The MSP that's not part of the budget conversation is they're going to be part of the exit conversation, I promise you.
Yep, absolutely. So this actually is a good segue, because so these are the things that we're seeing now. MSPs who get it are starting to offer is these higher end premium services that they add to their portfolio that really have nothing to do with a specific technology area, and it's all very much consulting oriented. So working with the C-level person in a customer environment on how to do their digital transformation, because a lot of customers also, as we said earlier, they hear a lot about digital transformation, don't necessarily know what it is, but they're going to start asking their providers, and they have been. And so if you can sit down and describe it to them, and then based on that customer's environment, figure out how to get them there, that is high profit. Right there. There's huge profitability in these types of services. Now, we are not seeing all of these things that you see on the list here as, widespread offerings that most MSPs are doing today, but increasingly so. They're beginning to realize that this is your higher value add, is if you can provide this. I mean, nothing is worse than going into a customer and you're selling them the basic MSP services and telling them how you will provide them and giving them an assessment on their network or whatever it happens to be. And then have a customer ask you, do you do this? Can you help us with compliance? And you just have to kind of have that blank look on your face and not know how to do it. You can also charge a heck of a lot more for these services than you can for.
That's the difference, like you were saying, like the original hybrid MSPs, the ones that have had to come into this, they're the ones that are more apt to say, okay, well, I don't want to lose the big projects. I don't want to, because there's a hefty sum to be made for a cabling project or hardware refresh. Yep. If it's a non-MSP customer, the ones that are newer that are coming in that are seeing it from a macro, seeing it from the outside in, realize there are projects in MSP land. There are projects in MRR land. It's just, they're different types of projects. It's the list that you have on this list that there is so much more money there. And I can do this from my chair. I don't need to be sitting on a ladder 12 feet up running cable through a ceiling. And there's so much more money to be done with this on a recurring basis. Yep. How many MSPs are bringing on Salesforce consultants for their clients? You know what I mean? It's mind-boggling, and they charge a premium, and everyone's the better for it.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of MSPs were worried about even attempting to sell things like this because they didn't think customers would be interested, or initially customers were not. But what we're seeing is customers are. And that brings us to this next slide. And we asked, the respondents, what has been the reviews or the perceptions of these higher level services from your current customers? And as you can see here, overwhelmingly, customers find this important and highly valued. So that's a good thing. So don't worry, get the skills, and don't be afraid to go ahead and try to sell these things to customers thinking that they're going to, say no. They're not. Customers are thirsty for good advice around how to run their business better. And it's not just about the technology. So this is encouraging. This is the first time we asked about this, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I do think this trend of offering these premium services is going to continue. At least for the smart MSPs, you should go there, especially since customers are interested.
I'm going to steal that from you and quote it every chance I get. You said something, customers are thirsty for good advice on how to run their business better. I couldn't agree with you more. That's another one of those things. Say it 1,000 times over, please. You don't have to learn to sell it. The customers are asking for it. You just have to know how to have the conversation.
Right. You need to be cogent and understand how to sell it. But yeah, the customers are asking. Customers are a lot smarter today than they were, when I first started in this business. So many people are digital natives, out of the womb these days. So they already have this sort of, relationship with technology, and they're asking a lot of questions, and they're interested in how they can run their business better based on whatever technology that you're willing to offer. So yeah, smart customers, don't undervalue them at all. Or this is just a fun slide. We'll go through this quickly, but we were interested in what MSPs are doing from a cloud perspective. Like, who did you sell last year, and what were some of the things in your quiver when it comes to IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So this is just a list. Obviously, the big guys are way up on the list, but as you go down, there's a lot, and this list continued. It just goes to show you how the cloud world has exploded in terms of the number of vendors and ISVs and opportunities out there. It used to be, I think I referenced before, when you were just a VAR back in the day, you worked with one of the three big guys. You were selling HP printers, or you were working with IBM, or you were working with Microsoft, obviously on the software side. Today, it's just gangbusters how many vendors that you can work with, and this is just cloud-based. So I thought this is just a little fun fact thing for.
One of the things I hear MSPs talk about as far as obstacles when selling the solutions is clients don't want to do SaaS. I personally don't agree with it, but the clients don't want to pay SaaS. They don't want to do the recurring model. They're used to buying, now, not that it's available anymore, but like Office 2013 for $200 and they're done for a lifetime. That SaaS exhaustion, are you seeing that in the real world in these, when you guys are doing this, collecting this data?
I can't speak for customers. I don't know. I mean, for line of business, I would say SaaS is kind of booming because it's easy for them. If they don't need to go to the IT department or anything, they're like, oh, this is a cool application. I can deploy it through my marketing department right now.
Right.
From a budgeting perspective, I don't know. It's a good question. And there's also the question from the MSP side is how much money can be made right now in SaaS. It's very incremental. And I think the revenue model right now is still a little bit iffy.
It takes a lot of operational overhead off the MSP as well. When you're saying, okay, well, another vendor is going to handle platform and service, and as far as the platform delivery and new feature generations, a lot of times documentation and training should make it that much easier for the MSP to sell these services.
Yeah, no, I mean the deployment model is obviously very simple, right? And then the upgrade cycle is almost an automatic, and the customer doesn't get involved. So, I think there may be, we may be in a learning curve right now a little bit with customers, but I think this is going to be the model moving forward. The days of shrink wrap software that sits on a shelf and you only use little itty bitty pieces of it, I think are ending. And the other good thing about SaaS is it opens a world of higher end types of software like ERP that was never affordable for a small company before. You weren't buying SAP's ERP platform if you were a 20-person company. It's just impossible. A, you couldn't afford it. B, even if you could, you didn't have anyone on staff who would be able to deploy it effectively, right?
Implementation would kill you. Yeah.
It would. So one of the upsides to SaaS is that you broadened the market for companies to be able to afford some of these packages that they never could have in the past. So for what it's worth, there's a lot of companies out there. That's the one confusing thing. And I think this is one area I'll get off this slide quick, but one of the opportunity areas for MSPs or any solution provider in general is the education component here, because this is like you're going to one of those restaurants who have a 10-page menu, and you're like, please just boil this down to 10 items that I can choose from to eat tonight. So it's overwhelming. And so you just, you're either throwing a dart at the wall to decide which one you're going to go with. And it's a lot easier if you're working with a provider who knows your business and then can narrow the choices down on that menu to 5, and then you can work through which one you're going to choose. So that's, again, gets back a little bit to consulting. So pricing, oh, we ask about pricing all the time, and we can't really talk too much about pricing.
No, there's never a pricing conversation ever.
So, we don't, we do not examine pricing at the nitty-gritty level at CompTIA because we cannot, as a nonprofit. It's all this antitrust stuff that we have to stay out of that mix. And there are other consultants out there who do this in depth, but we do ask our MSPs in the study every year how they price. And per user has remained the number one. I made a prediction, and I was wrong, obviously, a few years ago, that it was going to move to per device, because just the logic in my head said, why would you charge for, if there's 10 users in a company, why would you charge per user when every one of those users has 3 devices? They've got their phone now, they've got the tablet, they've got their laptop, whatever it is. It seemed to me, and maybe that just is simplified math, that I was doing there, but I was wrong, because per user still seems to be the predominant way that MSPs are pricing, and that has not changed over the 10 years that I've been here.
I can give the counterpoint to that. I'm sure you've heard it all at this point. You're probably more than perhaps, but I've always been a strong proponent of per user. Now, I think it depends heavily on what your ideal client type is, right? Like we always, when we were an MSP, we always went after regulated businesses, professional offices, right? So the structure of those employees is going to be far different than a manufacturing, industrial, retail, hospitality, totally different. But in the professional space, or the regulated professional business space, those businesses understood what the cost per employee was. That was easily calculable. So they can go and say, okay, when I'm going to hire a new person, again, toward the budgetary and the planning side of it, when we're budgeting for a new person or 2 new hires or 3 new hires in 2021, we know it's also going to add this managed service cost to us. And that's a fixed number. We always accounted for X amount of devices per user that was just calculated in aggregate across the entire organization. So we actually did that 3 device per user, across a minimum of 10 users, so 30 devices, knowing full well that number was not going to be uniform across all of them. It was rare that all 10 had 3 devices. And that allowed us wiggle room to be able to employ the services we needed and the extra tools we needed without creating an extra cost. And if it went to 31 devices, 32 devices for that one 10-person customer, it wasn't the end of the world either. We were charging enough, it didn't really matter. But the opposite was, didn't want to get into a conversation with the client of, we're charging for the iPad, but we're not charging for the laptop. But now you added, you wanted to add an extra device to have a hot spare backup in the office. And are we going to start charging for that too? We didn't want to create that burden or that obstacle for the client. Wanted to make it easy. And at least that's my 2 cents on.
No. It makes sense. I'm sure the level of complexity to do per device, I think, just the tracking involved, and it does put some burden on the customer as well. And I think it does depend on the industry that you're selling into. Like, if you're mainly working with manufacturing providers that and the staff all work out on a factory floor, per device doesn't really make that much sense for them. If you're working with a professional services firm, both a bunch of knowledge workers, maybe it makes more sense because that they're going to have a bunch of devices. But I think this has always been it's a little bit of a guessing game for a lot of MSPs about the best way for them to price.
Well, because most of their costs come out of per device, right? Like when they're calculating their own burden, it's usually a per device model. So I know we're running up against the hour, and I apologize. It's because you have really good data, and I love data. I really do. For those that are, Carolyn's been talking about this, but we do have the slide deck available. You can go to the website I have on the screen, and you can download the slide deck. We will include I don't know why I keep trying to call you Amy. We will include Carolyn's. I was watching something previously, and I had Amy stuck in my head. We will include Carolyn's contact information as well. I'm not cutting you off. I just want to make sure, in case anybody had a hard out at 2:00, I want to make sure they know where they can go if they need more information.
Sounds good. So should I continue?
Yeah, we do. As long as we can wrap in the next 5 minutes, I think we'll be fine.
Okay. Well, I think we talked about managed IoT already quite a bit, so I might just zoom through this section again, and then get to the last one, which was managed security. Now, we did talk about security quite a bit as well, but one of the things we asked about for the first time in this study is we segmented the respondents who identified themselves as MSSP, just to figure out what they're all about and what's different about their businesses. Similar question, asking them, what type of MSSP they consider themselves. And it's a pretty even mix here. There's about 4 in 10 that consider themselves pure play. So that's all they do is security, period. Then you've got these 2 hybrid types who sound like companies that were initially MSPs and still are and offer some of the more traditional MSP offerings, but have made security either a separate entity within their business or have made security the forefront of their business, but they still offer a bunch of other stuff. This is no surprise. All I've found with the MSP market, whether it's security specialists or not, it just tends to be a little bit of a Wild West in terms of what people offer. And this is what they offer, the managed security services folks. Obviously, the table stake stuff at the top, all MSPs pretty much offer AV, firewall, backup, all of that stuff. But what MSSPs distinguish themselves in is offering some of these other things that you go down from penetration testing and compliance audits to encryption tools and ransomware prevention. That needs to be in your stable of offerings, in my opinion, for you to be able to really call yourself an MSSP and not just an MSP who does some of that, top of the list types of security services.
At the risk of delaying you, are you concerned with there's not a firm structure around a firm definition around what an MSSP is? The same struggle we're having with MSP today. Are you worried about that happening to MSSP as well?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I think we need some sort of checklist. It's the same thing with managed services. What are you? And so we're trying to identify. That's what was generally the nature of these questions that we asked. Is what makes you an MSSP? And these are the things that they're saying. It's that we do and provide this, much more varied level of security services. This slide's broken out by different size companies, if anyone was wondering what that all means on the side there. And one of the other things is most of these MSSPs said they need to have a SOC, their own. They either build it and operate it themselves or they use a third party. And we at CompTIA believe that is one of the hallmarks of being a true blue MSSP. This 13% who say they don't own a SOC nor use a third party, I find them a great mystery. I'd love to know who they are, but I would say that 13% really can't describe themselves as an MSSP. Yeah. There's outliers in all these studies all the time. Yeah, always. And this is actually my last slide, so we're gonna keep it cool. I just think this is interesting because the other thing that we asked is one of the things we found with MSSPs is they tend to have a much more layered number and type of job role within their organization. So they don't just have a security analyst on staff or a security engineer, but they, often almost all will have a CISO of some sort, and they have a lot of these different types of security specialists. So if you want to call yourself an MSSP, the type of hiring that you're going to have to do will map to some of the job roles that you're seeing here.
That's a nice indicator. That's a nice, at least, qualifier that somebody may be an MSSP or maybe qualified to call themselves an MSSP. Better said, the types of roles. I've never looked at it like that. You talk about CISO all the time, security analyst, but there's a lot of them here that makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Yep. So if you're looking to get into the job market in security, some of these are going to be hot areas for you going forward. So
that's awesome.
And that brings us to the end. I know we're over, but I'm happy to take any questions, or you can find me. You all know how to find me, Ray and Keith, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, we have your contact information across the bottom. One of the questions I did see that we didn't get to during this was what's the definition of IoT? Of course, it's Sean asking for a friend, but I imagine the friend is Sean. So, you know, what
I,
was the qualifier you would use?
I would tell you to Google it probably, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's the answer, I think, is yes. I mean, everything qualifies as IoT lately, but I'd love to say it's door sensors or any kind of presence sensors or remote work, networking, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, I have probably 10 IoT things on my desk right now, including these remote access wall outlets I need to install across the house. So, and customers are making better use of them. Well, Carolyn, thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your time. I love this data. It's absolutely awesome. I'm going to sit there and digest it tonight. And I'm not even kidding about that. That is a good Wednesday night for me, sitting looking at this kind of data. But thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Her contact information is across the bottom. I will put again the download link for the slides if you'd like to get a copy, or contact Carolyn if you want to get a deeper understanding. But Carolyn, thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'll go ahead and let you go. I want to be respectful of your time. You have a great day. Okay.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, same here. Guys, well, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely appreciate your time. Appreciate you spending another hour with us. We definitely love having you here. Don't forget, we have later this week, we have upcoming events. We have the Tech Bar with Amy Luby of Acronis. This will be our Friendsgiving episode. So definitely come and spend some time with us. That's this Thursday on December 2nd. We have the Partner First webinar featuring Cloud Plus, and they have an awesome secret they want to let out of the bag, and they're doing it live on the webinar with us, which I appreciate. December 3rd, Tech Bar featuring Jonathan Crow, good friend of Ninja RMM, who was actually doing a crowdcast right now during this event. So I miss him, my good friend, because I always love to participate in those. And then December 9th at 1 o'clock, another CompTIA webinar, Industry Trends, featuring the lovely Carolyn April. Talk about a win-win for everybody. Different subject matter, but definitely the right person to be sharing this information. So thanks once again. You guys have our contact information. You need to know how to go hold of us. Our socials are below, but looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. Have a great rest of your week, guys.